My name is Mitchell Rodriguez, and I'm a senior product designer at Nexus Digital, where innovation dies in conference rooms and creativity gets suffocated by corporate buzzwords. Picture this: converted warehouse spaces with exposed brick that's supposed to look authentic, standing desks that nobody actually uses, and inspirational quotes vinyl printed on walls by people who've never had an original thought. The day my world shifted, I was refining the user interface for our flagship mobile banking app while sipping my second cold brew of the morning. Our monthly all-hands meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., one of those mandatory showcase events where departments parade their accomplishments like peacocks displaying their plumage for executive approval. My team had been developing the secure flow payment system for 4 months. We created something revolutionary, an intuitive, seamless payment experience that reduced transaction friction by 67% while actually improving security protocols. It was the kind of design breakthrough that made my creative soul dance. The project had been my vision from conception. I'd spent sleepless nights studying user behavior patterns, analyzing pain points in existing payment flows, and designing an architecture that made complex financial transactions feel as natural as sending a text message. My team, brilliant minds like Elena Vasquez, our UX researcher who could decode user psychology like reading a children's book, and David Chun, whose prototyping skills turned abstract concepts into tangible experiences, had poured their passion into this project. But when presentation time arrived, our creative director, Patricia Blackwell, a woman who pronounced synergy like it was sacred scripture she'd personally written, stood before the executive panel with her rehearsed confidence. Patricia had joined Nexus Digital 8 months ago with a portfolio from an agency whose primary achievement seemed to be winning awards for campaigns nobody remembered, and she'd been systematically repositioning herself as the creative genius behind every successful project that crossed her purview. The Secure Flow initiative is exceeding all performance metrics, she began, advancing to a slide featuring our user flow diagrams. However, I've made the strategic decision to transition creative leadership of this project to the innovation squad. They've demonstrated superior conceptual thinking for this type of disruptive user experience. The words landed like a punch to the solar plexus. The innovation squad, led by the perpetually articulate Brandon Hartwell, occupied the premium workspace on the building's top floor, the area with floor-to-ceiling windows, Herman Miller chairs, and espresso machine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Brandon had cultivated relationships with senior leadership through his supernatural ability to appear at every company retreat, design thinking workshop, and creative brainstorming session that involved catered sushi. I felt something Arctic settle in my chest. Not the cold brew, but that familiar sensation of watching your creative DNA being repackaged for someone else's career elevation. The innovation squad had been fumbling their own client deliverables for months. Their superior conceptual thinking apparently consisted of scheduling ideation sessions about ideation sessions and creating elaborate mood boards that captured everything except actionable insights. The room responded with enthusiastic approval. Executive heads nodded like metronomes, keeping time to a song nobody was actually playing. Our VP of Product, Kenneth Morrison, leaned forward with the satisfied expression of someone convinced he'd just witnessed strategic brilliance in motion. Patricia continued her performance, explaining how the innovation squad would inject fresh creative energy and proven design methodologies into our project. I sat there, hands clasped, watching 4 months of my team's creative labor being redistributed like party favors. My colleagues exchanged uncomfortable glances. Angela from User Research caught my eye with a look that screamed, "This is absolutely insane," while Carlos from Front-End Development stared intensely at his MacBook screen, probably updating his Behance portfolio. After the meeting, I confronted Patricia privately in her glass-walled office decorated with design books she'd clearly never opened and succulent plants that somehow managed to look pretentious. "The Secure Flow system is 90% complete," I said, maintaining measured professionalism. "My team understands every interaction principle, every user journey, every accessibility consideration. We've already solved the authentication challenges that their previous design partner spent 6 months failing to address." She adjusted her designer glasses, a nervous gesture that made her look like she was constantly trying to focus on something just out of reach. "Mitchell, you're exceptionally talented, but leadership requires vision. Brandon has that strategic creative mindset we need for high-impact client relationships. Plus, his squad has experience with enterprise-level user experience design." Strategic creative mindset. Corporate translation, attends the right networking events. I wanted to mention that the Innovation Squad's last enterprise-level design had been a customer portal so confusing that users regularly called customer service just to log in, but I maintained diplomatic silence. Sometimes restraint communicates more than confrontation. That evening, I made a decision that would either destroy my career or transform it completely. I requested permission to work remotely for the following 3 weeks, citing the need to create comprehensive design documentation and facilitate knowledge transfer. Patricia approved immediately, probably relieved to eliminate potential dissenting voices from her meetings. But I had discovered something deeply troubling during my final project review, something that made the Innovation Squad's involvement infinitely more sinister than simple corporate maneuvering. Hidden within our shared design repositories, I'd found evidence of unauthorized access attempts. Someone had been infiltrating our design systems, downloading wireframes, copying interaction patterns, and appropriating creative solutions. The digital evidence was subtle but unmistakable to someone who understood both design security and human psychology. Brandon Hartwell's team hadn't simply been assigned to take over our project. They'd been studying it for weeks, preparing to claim ownership of innovations they couldn't generate independently. This wasn't corporate incompetence. It was calculated intellectual theft disguised as management strategy. What Patricia didn't realize was that I'd been quietly maintaining my personal backup of the Secure Flow project. Every wireframe, every user flow, every interaction principle meticulously documented in my private development environment. Call it paranoia, call it professional insurance. But in 12 years of design work, I'd learned that the only person guaranteed to protect your creative work is yourself. From my home studio, I monitor the Innovation Squad's daily stand-up meetings through our company's transparent collaboration culture. Brandon Hartwell facilitated these sessions with the enthusiasm of someone who'd read exactly one book about design leadership and decided he was ready to revolutionize user experience design. They spent their first week attempting to understand what we'd built, their second week debating whether to redesign it entirely. Meanwhile, I conducted my own investigation. Late-night security audits revealed the comprehensive scope of the Innovation Squad's creative espionage operation. They hadn't just stolen our current work. They'd been systematically harvesting design assets from multiple projects across the creative division. Brandon had cultivated relationships not just with executives, but with junior designers hungry for mentorship, extracting creative insights under the pretense of cross-team collaboration. The evidence was devastating. Unauthorized repository access, copied design files with minimal modifications, and a pattern of project acquisitions that coincided suspiciously with major client presentations. The Innovation Squad wasn't just incompetent. They were operating a sophisticated system to monetize other people's creative innovations. But I also worked on something else during those 3 weeks. Not transition documentation, completion. 20-hour days fueled by determination and dangerously excessive caffeine consumption. I refined our payment interface, implemented the final security protocols that would make any attempted plagiarism immediately detectable, and conducted user testing that would impress NASA's quality assurance team. I also embedded something extraordinary, a series of hidden authentication markers that would verify the design's legitimate ownership. If anyone attempted to replicate our work without proper authorization, the system would not only malfunction spectacularly, but would also generate comprehensive logs of the attempted theft. It was creative watermarking at its most sophisticated, invisible until triggered, irrefutable when activated. By day 20, I possessed something that transcended functionality and achieved elegance. A complete production-ready payment system that could handle complex financial transactions like a master conductor directing a philharmonic orchestra. Every edge case anticipated, every potential failure point reinforced, and every intellectual property concern addressed through technological innovation. On day 21, I sent a single email to our primary client's technical team, Secure Flow system ready for final testing and implementation. Please confirm availability for launch sequence. The response arrived within 30 minutes. Our client CTO, Rachel Armstrong, called me directly, not through official channels, not through Patricia, but straight to my personal work line. Mitchell, this is extraordinary. We've been testing your payment interface all morning, and honestly, it exceeds every specification we provided, and more. The user experience metrics are surpassing our projections by 55%. Can we schedule implementation for tomorrow morning? That's when things became interesting. At 2:23 p.m., while I was walking Rachel's team through the deployment process, my phone exploded with notifications. Patricia was calling, texting, sending urgent Slack messages that grew increasingly frantic with each unanswered attempt. But the real fireworks began when the innovation squad attempted to demonstrate their enhanced version of the secure flow system to Kenneth Morrison the following week. Their stolen design assets, modified just enough to avoid obvious plagiarism detection, failed catastrophically when they encountered my hidden authentication protocols. The system didn't just malfunction. It generated a comprehensive report detailing every unauthorized access attempt, every copied file, and every piece of creative property that had been appropriated without permission. The presentation, according to Elena, who witnessed it through our open concept office acoustics, was legendary. Brandon Hartwell's polished presentation dissolved into incoherent stammering as he tried to explain why their innovative enhancements were causing cascade failures across multiple interface components. Kenneth Morrison, who might not understand interaction design, but definitely understood when he was being manipulated, demanded immediate explanations. Finally, Patricia called my home office landline, her voice trembling like someone facing professional extinction. "How did you complete this independently?" Gone was the corporate sophistication, replaced by raw panic. "Our client is saying the system is perfect and ready for full production. They're discussing timeline acceleration and additional feature development. But Brandon is telling me their version isn't functioning and there are security concerns about unauthorized access. What the hell is happening?" I allowed the silence to extend long enough for her to fully appreciate her confusion. "I finished the project," I said simply. "You know, the one requiring superior conceptual thinking. Oh, and I also discovered some fascinating patterns in our design repository access logs. Would you prefer I send those to IT security, or would you rather handle this internally?" The pause that followed was so extended, I wondered if the connection had failed. "Mitchell," Patricia said finally, her voice barely audible. "We need to meet." The next day, our company Slack exploded like digital fireworks. Rachel Armstrong had published a LinkedIn post praising Nexus Digital's exceptional creative execution and specifically highlighting my outstanding individual contribution to a complex user experience challenge. She tagged our CEO, mentioned potential partnership expansions, and used phrases like industry-leading innovation and design excellence. But the real earthquake occurred behind closed doors. My comprehensive security audit, which I formally submitted to IT and legal departments, triggered an immediate investigation into the innovation squad's operations. Within 72 hours, Brandon Hartwell was placed on administrative leave pending a complete review of intellectual property violations. The investigation revealed systematic theft spanning 14 months, affecting 9 different client projects, and involving fraudulent billing practices that had cost Nexus both revenue and reputation. Brandon hadn't just been stealing designs. He'd been selling consulting services to external clients using proprietary creative solutions developed by other teams. The scope was staggering. Internal audit discovered that Brandon had established a shell creative agency, Hartwell Design Innovations, operating from a co-working space. He'd been moonlighting as a freelance creative director, bidding on projects using stolen Nexus digital intellectual property, then delivering solutions that were essentially copy-paste jobs with minimal modifications. His client roster included 3 direct competitors and several firms in adjacent industries, companies that had unknowingly purchased our innovations at discount rates. The financial impact was severe enough to trigger an emergency board meeting. Our legal team estimated damages in the low 7 figures, not including potential client defections and reputation damage. More troubling, some of Brandon's external clients had integrated our stolen creative solutions into their own systems, creating a web of intellectual property contamination that would require months to resolve. But here's where my authentication protocols proved their value beyond simple detection. The creative watermarking I'd embedded in our systems didn't just identify theft. It provided forensic quality evidence of exactly what had been stolen, when, and how it was being utilized. Our legal team described it as the most comprehensive intellectual property documentation they'd encountered in a corporate theft case. The aftermath was swift and surprisingly professional. Patricia requested a private meeting, this time in person, where she delivered a genuine, uncomfortable apology that felt like watching someone confront their own professional mortality. She'd been manipulated as thoroughly as anyone, seduced by Brandon's polished presentations and promises of enhanced creative performance. "I should have trusted your design judgment," she admitted, removing her designer glasses entirely in what seemed like a symbolic gesture. I got caught up in the politics and forgot that exceptional design speaks for itself. The innovation squad was dissolved entirely. Brandon Hartwell was terminated for cause, along with 2 junior designers who had been complicit in the intellectual property theft. The remaining team members were redistributed across other projects where they could contribute honestly to legitimate creative work. I found myself with a new title, Principal Creative Director, reporting directly to the VP of Product. But more significantly, I was granted explicit authority to implement comprehensive security protocols across all creative teams, ensuring that intellectual property theft would be immediately detectable in the future. My original team was reassembled with expanded resources and a mandate to lead Nexus Digital's most ambitious creative initiatives. Elena and David were promoted to senior positions, and we were authorized to recruit additional talent to support our growing responsibilities. Our primary client became our biggest advocate, leading to 4 additional enterprise contracts within the quarter. Rachel Armstrong and I developed a professional relationship built on mutual respect and shared appreciation for design that actually functions. She even offered me a position with their company, which I gracefully declined. I had unfinished business at Nexus Digital. The real victory wasn't the promotion or the salary increase, though both were substantial. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, creative excellence speaks louder than corporate politics, and that intellectual integrity, properly defended, can triumph over sophisticated theft. The Secure Flow project became a case study within Nexus Digital, featured in our internal creative newsletter, and cited in several industry publications. Rachel Armstrong presented our collaboration at the National User Experience Conference, describing it as a masterclass in individual creative excellence combined with ethical project stewardship. The recognition attracted recruitment inquiries from several Fortune 500 companies, though I found myself surprisingly content with my evolved role at Nexus Digital. The incident also sparked broader industry conversations about intellectual property protection in collaborative creative environments. I was invited to speak at 4 design conferences about implementing security protocols that protect innovation without stifling creativity. The presentations were well received, leading to consulting opportunities that I carefully balanced with my primary responsibilities. More personally, the experience taught me that creative brilliance means nothing without the courage to defend it. I'd always been comfortable solving complex problems in isolation. But learning to navigate corporate politics while maintaining ethical standards proved to be its own kind of design challenge, one requiring different methodologies, but equally precise execution. Perhaps most importantly, the incident led to company-wide changes in how creative leadership was evaluated and assigned. Kenneth Morrison implemented new policies requiring design demonstrations for any project reassignments, ensuring that creative decisions would be made by people who actually understood design. 6 months later, I still work from home most days, not out of resentment, but because I've learned that the best creative work often happens away from the performance theater of corporate life. My cold brew consumption has stabilized at reasonable levels, though I maintain an emergency caffeine reserve for deadline crises. Patricia eventually found her rhythm as a creative manager in a different division where her skills in client relationship management could flourish without creative oversight responsibilities. She learned from the experience, becoming more collaborative and significantly more humble in her approach to leadership. We exchange professional courtesy in hallway encounters and maintain the kind of working relationship that acknowledges shared history without dwelling on it. The Secure Flow system still operates flawlessly, processing millions of transactions daily with the quiet efficiency of exceptional design. I've built additional security monitoring into all our major creative systems, creating a digital protection network that safeguards intellectual property while enabling legitimate collaboration. Brandon Hartwell, I heard through professional networks, eventually found work at a smaller agency where his presentation skills could be properly channeled and his creative limitations more closely supervised. The legal proceedings against him were settled quietly, but the design industry has a long memory for intellectual property violations. Sometimes I check the system analytics just to watch it perform. A digital symphony playing across servers on 4 continents. Proof that individual creative excellence, properly applied and ethically defended, can indeed move mountains, or at least move user experiences while protecting the people who create them, which in our industry amounts to the same thing. The security protocols I implemented have since prevented 5 additional attempts at intellectual property theft, validating the investment in creative watermarking and access monitoring. More importantly, they fostered a culture where creative innovation is protected and properly attributed, encouraging the kind of creative risk-taking that drives genuine progress. One particularly satisfying incident occurred 6 months after the Brandon Hartwell situation. A designer from our Seattle office attempted to copy interaction patterns from my SecureFlow interface for use in a personal freelance project. The security system detected the unauthorized usage within hours, but instead of triggering punitive measures, it initiated an educational protocol I designed. The designer received an automated message explaining intellectual property policies along with resources for creating similar solutions through legitimate research and development. The outcome was enlightening. Rather than facing disciplinary action, the designer approached me directly to discuss collaboration opportunities. We ended up co-developing a generalized version of the SecureFlow architecture that could be released as open-source design patterns, properly attributed and legally cleared. The project became one of Nexus Digital's most successful community contributions, generating positive press and attracting top-tier creative talent who wanted to work for a company that balanced innovation protection with knowledge sharing. My home studio still overlooks the same view, but now it's equipped with multiple monitors displaying security dashboards alongside design mock-ups. I've become something of an internal consultant on creative security, helping other teams protect their innovations while fostering legitimate collaboration. The work has evolved from pure product design to something more comprehensive, designing not just creative solutions, but the cultural and procedural frameworks that sustain them. The cold brew is still excellent. The work remains challenging. And the satisfaction of building experiences that endure and protecting the people who build them continues to be as fulfilling as ever.